Well, boys, looks like you started the fun without me.
You're all sick. Every last one of you.
We're going to need a bigger gun.
What's the matter? You scared of things that go boom, boom?
Give me one goddamn reason why I shouldn't blow your goddamn brains all over that goddamn wall.
Get out your white beats and your black contacts. It's time for double feature. You know, I promise you, this is my last week of my South African musical obsession.
Yeah.
This is it. I'm only giving myself one more week for it, then I'm going to snap back to reality.
Okay.
I'm Eric, by the way.
Oh,
And,
hey. Yeah.
Hey, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Eric.
Oh, my name is Michael. I will fuck you in the ass. Punk ass white boy.
Sorry, what?
Sorry.
Oh, Jesus. Thanks for throwing me off on the intro. I don't even know what's happening right now.
2 films, double feature.
Right. But while we're spending one more week in fantasy, what are the movies we're going to do?
Wow, good one.
You like that?
We're gonna do The Ward,
Uh-huh.
and then we're gonna do Darkon.
So this is make me think I'm not crazier than everyone else. Double
Yeah.
feature. This is just bringing Eric back into normality.
Yeah.
Thanks, Michael. I
We've
appreciate
been spending
that.
a lot of time with crazy people this year on double feature. And that's just me and you sitting watching the films.
Right.
But also in the films,
Right.
there have been a lot of crazy people.
Yeah, so we're going to make the crazy a little bit more normal today. Or
Yeah.
maybe we won't. We'll find out. But in doing that, we're going to spoil both of the movies.
Gotta spoil them.
Yeah, you pretty much have to spoil the movies.
If it's double feature, it must be spoiled.
The thing I love about spoiling the movies is we don't have to do it at all. But
Yeah.
it's our show, so fuck you. Use the chapters. We give you chapters. We put up a big middle finger, and then we say, but there's chapters.
Right.
And then no one uses the chapters. They just spoil themselves. Why do you do this? Skip the movie that you haven't seen. The Ward's coming up first. I'm
Yep.
going to spoil part of our show right now. It's going to happen first. You can skip it with a fucking chapter. You can go right to Darkon, which you'll never see anyways.
Yeah, you
it's
haven't
a documentary.
seen it. It's really difficult to spoil Darkon.
Yeah.
We've already told you that it's a movie. That's a pretty heavy spoiler.
Yeah, right.
So then after that, we're going to go right to the end to talk about...
Movies we're doing next time. What is The Ward? Why is that on the show? What is this thing today?
Well, The Ward is a film by John Carpenter.
Whoa, there's still John Carpenter movies we haven't done.
There's a lot.
How is this possible? I say this every time.
The Ward is actually kind of this. He did it. This is what his second comeback film.
Yeah.
It's the first film he did since Ghosts of Mars.
Finally, a glimpse of this new John Carpenter we keep referencing,
Right.
but not actually discussing on the show.
Yeah, and we've missed out on a lot of John Carpenter. We've kind of artfully dodged the 90s
Sure.
of John Carpenter, with the exception of Escape from LA.
For now.
But there's a large portion of John Carpenter's career where he spiraled into obscurity and everybody started hating everything he did.
Sure.
He did that vampires movie with James Woods.
Oh, yeah.
And he did In the Mouth of Madness.
Sure.
He did all these movies in the 90s that everybody hated and were absolute critical failures and box office failures. And then he did The Ghost of Mars, which, unlike the previous films, everybody hated it and it was a box office failure. And so now we have The Ward. So The Ward is, it's a definitive return to horror.
Yeah.
The Ghost of Mars is John Carpenter dabbling in his sci-fi horror thing that we saw with Dark Star, because that was terrifying.
Right.
But The Ward is it's where horror lives, in a fucking mental institution with Amber Heard and Jared Harris.
I'm sorry, it's an asylum, sir.
Yeah.
You don't call a place like this an institution.
It's true.
One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest was in an institution. This is an asylum.
Fair enough. It's a sanitarium.
Yeah, sanitarium. It's really, man, that's what it is.
So The Ward, it's not written by John Carpenter.
Mm-hmm.
It's not scored by John Carpenter, but
Yeah.
it is directed by John Carpenter.
Sure.
And it still looks like it came out in the late 70s.
Man, when the movie opens, I'm feeling the way John Carpenter films in the 70s.
Right.
But I'm a little surprised by how modern it looks.
Yeah.
It's definitely, it's a movie from today.
Yeah.
But the kind of technique and just, the camera's low to the ground. There's these incredibly still setups. The
All
lightning coming in.
Yeah, all stuff that John Carpenter's done. It's
Yeah,
all John
right,
Carpenter's
right.
stuff.
But then moves directly into this smashed glass kind of intro. It's a glimpse into the things that he was doing in Halloween. But this is, I would say, probably the most stylized Carpenter movie yet. that I've seen.
The thing is, and I'm under the impression, correct me if I'm wrong, that you haven't seen The Ghosts of Mars.
That's true.
So The Ghosts of Mars is similarly stylized in that it just looks like it was made in the 70s. I don't think John Carpenter has ever made a movie that looks like it came out after 1982.
See, I don't know. I feel like this looks modern. I mean,
do you? See,
it's
I feel
the technique that makes it look 70s to me.
Yeah, well, but that's what I mean. I don't know if it's an intentional
effect. Yeah.
I don't know if it's an intentional aesthetic to give it kind of a vintage look, or if that is really just how.
I think it's who he is, man.
Yeah, I think that's how John Carpenter makes his movies, which brings me to this thing that we touched on in Dark Star about how a certain filmmaker may have ripped a certain sci-fi saga off of Dark Star.
We talked about Star Wars and Dark Star.
And when you see this kind of vintage style, I mean, Black Dynamite, where it looks like it's the 70s, but it's clearly a modern film. Black Dynamite does it to the nth degree and far more intentionally.
Right.
But we see this thing in The Ward where I start thinking everybody's just been ripping off John Carpenter for years.
Well, yeah, that's the thing, is you watch a modern John Carpenter movie and you go, oh yeah, all these things I've been seeing. Suddenly now, that's what I mean when I say it looks modern.
Sure.
This is a sudden wake-up call to me to go, oh, these techniques. Oh, yes, I have seen these before.
Where there's things that I will watch in a film now that comes out and go, ooh, yeah, that's an interest. I like how the lighting is all really gray and everything is kind of this wan, pale, slow-paced thing, but there's still a really gritty, pulsing heartbeat behind everything. Yeah, that's fucking John Carpenter since 1979.
Yep, it is. And it's things we talked about in those movies, but I guess we never really took time to consider
bringing them into a modern setting, because neither did John Carpenter.
Well, I was going to say the influence they've had on the modern setting.
Yeah.
Because we see this pulse all the time.
Yeah.
We see the influence John Carpenter had on so many different people.
Sure.
And we never really stopped to consider, oh yeah, this seems very, I mean, maybe we do all the time. I don't know. It seems like we're constantly bringing up John Carpenter. But so many of these filmmakers in horror probably cite Carpenter as one of their major influences. Oh, yeah. And when you see him in a modern setting doing his thing, suddenly you're pointing at all these different scenes and going, oh, the pace here, the setting here, how these scenes are directed, how he's cutting from one thing to another. You're finding out how John Carpenter has influenced the modern world by seeing his stuff brought up to speed that way.
Well, and then we get the obvious distinction where there is no Carpenter score. And I think that takes me very quickly out of the typical... I always think of The Fog when I think of the John Carpenter setup for a film.
Sure.
Because I don't know if you remember in The Fog, the film opens on a single synthesizer note from a Casio keyboard with varying clips of a port town.
I don't have to remember because they all do that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I know what you mean. There's a creature from The Fog in The Ward. Does that help?
That's true. But The Ward opens with this kind of, they establish the sanitarium. They do the slow panning down the hallway.
Yeah, right.
They set up this, and it's scary as fuck.
Yeah, it is.
It's amazing to see John Carpenter go, these were my because we're younger. We didn't see Halloween when it came out.
Right.
We didn't see. I don't even honestly don't remember if I'd seen Halloween since before I'd seen the remake.
Oh yeah. Rob Zombie's doing something quick. Find out what it is.
Exactly.
And sound like you know what you're talking about.
That's why I love hockey now.
Yeah. So the first Halloween, you remember the opening shot in that being that long camera tracking.
Yeah.
That's totally the. It's kind of a version of how we're opening this.
Sure.
It's a little lower to the ground, but it's still long single tracking before we move around a bit.
And people always talk about how, oh my God, Halloween was so scary when it came out. And I'm like, yeah, well, you didn't see the movies I've seen. Ha ha ha. The Ward is terrifying. It's horrifying, and it's amazing to see John Carpenter go, these are my techniques in 2011.
Right.
This is why people were scared of my movies.
Right.
Because my techniques make you uncomfortable. And the longer you dwell on something, and the slower the pace becomes, the heartbeat of the film starts pounding in your brain, and you're constantly going, where is what coming from.
Right.
That's why when Alice starts showing up,
Yeah.
even though Alice doesn't look scary, it's just the way Alice is portrayed and the little things, the things under her skin.
Sure.
Nothing is comfortable.
Right.
But it's not uncomfortable because the camera's doing something dramatic. It's not uncomfortable because the camera is using weird angles or moving shaky, you know, the Shutter stuff from 28 Weeks Later where you're unsettled, but you can't tell why.
Right. Right.
John Carpenter makes you unsettled by going, no, everything's probably okay.
Right.
I mean, if you've ever, I don't know if you've ever even heard John Carpenter do like commentary.
Oh no, is that how he does it? Oh, that's perfect.
Yeah, in this scene, one of the things we really tried to do was kind of capture the dimness of this hallway, because I feel like a hallway like this really kind of embodies a sense of danger and horror and, you know, brutal violence. So
it's amazing. Oh man, I'm gonna take a weekend and just fucking watch all of his films with commentary. That's great. It's rare we get to see, and this is gonna sound awful after just seeing this kind of with the faculty, but seeing somebody so well known for something so divorced from their elements.
Yeah.
John Carpenter's just directing this. He didn't write it. He didn't do the sound. When I think John Carpenter, I think sound because of the jokes we make on this show. But I mean,
sometimes writing too.
Yeah, the writing stuff. You know, some of his most famous films he wrote.
Yeah.
And you look at the sound, and as much as we laugh about it, that is, I mean, I don't need to talk about this. We've talked about it to death. The sound makes John Carpenter work.
It does.
And so now we have, it's, again, great experiment, great case study.
Sure.
Let's have John Carpenter direct something and just see what other people do.
Yeah.
It's almost a cover album.
Yeah.
You know,
it's true. Yeah. That's
what
a good
do
way
other
of looking
people
at
do
it.
when they look at John Carpenter and then add score to it?
Yeah,
or, you know, how does that play out? And I think it tells us not only about him as a director, but it tells us just as much about him as a writer and a composer from what's not in this movie. You know, as it does about what does his direction look like if you separate these other things.
Right.
That's a great thing you can do to learn more about someone's visual style is just, you know, turn off the sound and just force yourself to focus on, all right, a horror movie like this, where are the scares coming from when it's subtitles and no score?
Right.
You know, the jumps are obviously a lot different, but you find totally different parts of the movie frightening than you normally would.
So, okay, before we get to the kill room, because the kill room is going to lead me to a very different place.
Sure.
There's multiple personalities in this movie.
Yeah.
And I think that the kill room is the most obvious moment where you can see that. Because where the fuck is this room? How do these girls get there? But they all die there.
Right. Right.
So the film deals with multiple personalities in a horror context from a clinical standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
Eric, I'm going to say I like it. I'm going to say I'm going to go out and I'm just going to say
Michael Custer is okay with it.
I'm going to say, and I mean, I'm not going to pretend that it's not because it's John Carpenter.
How does Tyler Durden feel about that verdict?
Well, see, the thing that I feel about The Ward is that once the multiple personalities thing drops, and if you didn't figure it out already, I mean, you must have been asleep, but if you didn't figure it out already, that isn't the end of it.
Sure.
It's kind of this twist reveal, but it goes to point out this really cool psychological thing about defense mechanisms in horrific situations and compartmentalizing your fears. And I feel like if anybody is going to do a psychological case study on how to handle utter terror, I want to watch John Carpenter do it.
Sure.
The other thing that I think was really ballsy is when all the multiple personalities are dispelled, it wasn't Amber Heard laying in the bed.
Yeah, right.
To go, no, you just came in. You aren't really, you were never here.
Right.
You are as new to the film as the audience.
Sure.
Everybody who's in this ward, they've been here, but they're also not real.
Yeah.
Everybody that we watch in the entire film isn't even there.
Sure.
That's the kind of fascinating part of the movie, is because you get multiple personalities. You get fucking, what was it, Manhunt 2?
Yeah.
Stuff where they deal in maybe the idea of multiple personalities. And you never really get something where at the end game, you're just watching the personalities.
Sure.
You're not watching the real human being dealing with their demons.
Sure.
You're solely watching the demons get weeded out.
Sure, right. Yeah.
By
acting them off one at a time.
Sure, you're watching reality pick them off. You're watching the insane elements of the human mind get therapied to death.
Well, it's also a way that they can take the horror convention of these cliche characters and then try and justify it.
Right.
To go, oh yeah, we have the childish one, and we have, you know, the, what is it, the id, the artist, the seductress. There's the TiVo moment where you go, oh, that's all the characters written on the, you know, the paper, the infant and so forth. And yeah, we get that it's the infant and the seductress, and they're written paper thin. And then when we find out multiple personalities, oh, that's why they're written like that. It's not because the movie's scary and therefore there's no dimensionality to the characters. It's because we're seeing one character strewn out on over all these people. Yeah.
And I think that that's a really okay way to do multiple personalities. The only way that I think would make it completely acceptable is if they come out of the gate going multiple personalities.
Sure.
You know, they come out of and maybe make it seem like Amber Heard's character is The Rock and everybody else isn't real.
You know, I like that idea for an approach too, though. I wonder how different this movie would be if you just revealed to everyone else that it was multiple personalities right from the get-go.
Yeah.
That's the effect you then have watching this again.
Sure.
And seeing how these interactions go.
Well, and I'm always of the idea that if you're going to make a twist on a movie, that's dumb. Don't. And just try something new and say the twist right off the bat.
Yeah, right.
And let people say the twist and then shoot the film as if you didn't.
Yeah.
And then instead of surprising people with it at the end, let people try to figure out why you're shooting things weird.
Sure. So the girls are one thing it centers around, but the other part of all those personalities would be Alice then, who is, I mean, she drives the mystery in this movie. We have all these personalities clashing against each other, and then we have the one thing that's kind of, you know, the catalyst for that.
Right.
Or what we would think is the catalyst before we get that reveal and kind of learn what's actually happening there. But they have this kind of group secret that I like, that it seems like everybody but Amber Heard's character is in on. Zoe's even fucking in on it, being so the outsider, almost the... I mean, she represents innocence, but also this kind of naive, you know, just she's still corruptible. She still plays her part in what happens, but she also has the one joke in the entire movie, which is in the elevator where she goes, "He's really mad," which is just, I love that too. Just straight out horror movie, scary, one good joke. Yeah, this should be a precedent we set. But anyways, but then there's Alice who's driving the mystery. And we know the thing attacking is Alice right away. Right. That's, you know, that's another thing that horror movies will often do, is kind of go, oh, what's the thing going to be? And no, it's Alice. We know it's Alice from the opening scene. But we start getting these little details. You know, Sarah's strapped down and calls out Alice's name. And so we know that Sarah knows who Alice is. We see her skin kind of crawl, like there's maggots or something moving underneath. So some kind of supernatural element or something dead. Or she starts by appearing in darkness, like that's a rule. Like we're thinking about supernatural monster rules. But eventually she's appearing in the middle of the fucking day. It's similar to the problem we faced in 28 Weeks Later, where the scares could come at any time. Yeah. She can, you know, materialize through a fucking dumbwaiter. I mean, nowhere is safe. They're saying gloves are off with everything. And so we're kind of figuring out who Alice is, right? So that we know what to be afraid of and what the rules of being afraid of that thing are supposed to be.
Well, and that brings me back to that kill room where a lot of the film is, you know, it's dialogue and discovery and searching and David Robert Jones trying to therapy, you know, your demons away. Right. And then
looking so much healthier. So much healthier.
But then we have this kill room where these horrific acts of violence take place. Yep. And it's amazing because, again, seeing mostly John Carpenter films from the early 80s, you know, I've never gotten a chance to see what John Carpenter's comfort level with violence is in a modern setting.
Sure.
And apparently it's a giant spike
right.
lobotomizing you.
Sure. Well, there's a lot of this that starts to feel like hostile. That starts to feel like a reaction to that stuff. And it would be very easy for one of the old timers to come in and say, these new kids with their horror porn and their movies are so terrible today. John Carpenter shows up and goes, oh, yeah, you guys are slaughtering people now. Cool. I can do that.
Yeah.
I'm into that. You know, kind of adapting to his setting. It's one of those things that makes me question. You know, I like the idea of John Carpenter as a guy who lives in a capsule, lives in the woods, and is not aware that it is no longer 1978.
Right.
But then he shows up in this movie and, you know, maybe it's studio stipulation or it's what's written in or whatever, but he directs it like it's fucking second nature for him, you know?
He just goes, oh, this is horror now, and I'm the horror guy, so
let's do this.
Stab their eyes. And then you get this moment in the film right at the end where the multiple personality gets told it's a multiple personality.
Sure.
And she starts going, no, wait, I don't remember anything.
Yeah. Whoops.
What did I do before I got here?
Oh, crap,
and
you're right.
She starts seeing her face being Alice's face in her memories. Right. And it's almost this fantastic moment where she goes, I've never existed. And then right about the time that the film would have to start doing some really meta weird shit, Alice tackles her out a window, just like in Halloween. Yep. And that's how you wrap that up. Well,
that's great, too, because as you're getting this heavy-handed explanation and it's the will the audience buy it moments, we also realize, you know what? The monster in this movie has only gone down once, and this is still a horror film. So what the reveal actually means is that the monster is still alive. There's no monsters in Darkon. Maybe personal demons. Let's talk about this is a film, in case people didn't watch this, because it's a fucking documentary, and you assholes skip the documentaries all the time, don't you? Don't you? I don't know. Maybe everybody watches the documentaries.
Every time, without fail, they're some of my favorite movies we do on the show.
Oh, I know. They're great.
Because
they're all great. Think about fucking all of them.
Actors are so boring.
Yeah, fuck you, actors.
I mean, actors and writing, God, what a boring way to put a story together. You want to do something interesting? Go out with a camera and film real people being real people.
Oh,
man. You film fucking Billy Mitchell for 15 minutes.
Yep.
I will laugh harder than any
Judd
Apatow, Seth MacFarlane, haha, funny teddy bear thing.
Well, and this movie does that hybrid thing, right? It does. Well, let's do the charming task of holding these people up as if they're actually in the thing they're doing. This is a movie about a medieval game, right? The kind of a role-playing game that people play and that they are really immersed in. It becomes one of the most important, if not the most important part of their lives, if not their whole life.
Right.
And we start the documentary with a very theatrical opening. You know, people are in full costume. We give them a time to shine right away. We have and this is something we do at a lot of points in the movie. There's the music, there's the dramatic angles and the confident editing. Even though these people aren't professional actors, when they're doing their role playing, we edit it together like they aren't delivering their lines, like they don't know what the fuck they're doing. Some of them are really good at it, and some of them are terrible at it. But the movie just keeps moving as if we accidentally put in a bad take and the editor was not aware of it. We just keep confidently marching through. And, you know, that shows how far you can sell something with camera work. How far the smooth moving camera can make it feel like a real epic fantasy film. Helicopter shots or the Citadel of Peace at the end, the way they shoot that, it's a fucking cardboard castle. And, you know, you film it with a sweeping crane shot, and you're totally in. So this does, as far as I can tell, two things. First of all, it's nice of them. You know, it's a nice thing the filmmakers do. It's a little present they give. These guys in the movie fantasize about something they can never truly be.
Sure.
And I'm not talking about, oh, you and I could be president, but not really we could be president. Right. I mean, we could never fucking be elves. Yeah. That is not a thing that will ever happen.
That's true.
Ever. But the movie comes along and it lets them be elves. You know what I mean? It gives them this rare opportunity. But I think more importantly, what it does is pull you as the audience over to their side a bit.
Yeah.
Because, you know, the mere fact it's like when we talked about Crash, whether or not Cronenberg knows he's doing a really fucking
Sure.
weird thing. The very nature of you have a film about this means you know it's an oddity,
Mm-hmm.
and then you have to try desperately to humanize that oddity. So it has an audience that's going, uh-oh, weird role-playing people.
Yeah.
You know, and they address that in the movie, how the normal
Sure.
people treat them. So the movie has to kind of go, oh, we're going to be on their side. Here's what it's like. It gives you a sense of, well, this is why these people, this is what it looks like in their heads.
Right.
This is why we're doing that. It puts you in their shoes. And I mean, that's hard for me because I'm not a fantasy guy. I have no medieval background. I dated a wench at medieval times for a while, but that was really about the extent of it. I'm the kind of asshole who always wants to show up to the Ren Fair as a robot. I've been plotting that for years.
Sounds like a great idea.
I want to show up in an Iron Man suit,
There you
is
go.
basically. But, you know, I'm watching this, and from the fucking opening, yeah, I'm hooked.
Sure.
I'm into it. I get what they're doing.
Well, and the other thing that I love about the film is we talked about King of Kong. We always bring up King of Kong whenever we do a documentary because
Total opposite. You
Yeah.
and I can chuck quarters in a machine all
Yeah.
day. We know how that works.
But the King of Kong documentary, they're clearly kind of making fun of them. They're patting them on the back. They're heroes in their own right, but
right. But there's no attempt to make us feel like we kind of get what they're
right. And in a global sense, they're kind of cutting them off and going, these people are weirdos with
Sure.
heroes within their ilk.
Also, you know, I mean, championing them.
Sure,
But
yeah.
it's telling a story about weirdos.
It's whereas Darkon makes no attempt to make any satire or parody of these people.
Right.
It doesn't necessarily say, look how cool they are, look
Sure,
how normal
sure.
they are. But what it does do is back the fuck off.
Yeah, right.
And turn the camera on.
Sure.
Um,
If you were in the King of Kong and you made a joke about how they're all nerds, it would be well received.
sure.
If you were in this movie and you made a joke about it, they would kick you out of their camp.
Sure.
You know what I mean? That would not be cool.
Right. Well, and that's kind of what they all talk about in the beginning of the film. And a lot of that is really powerful where they talk about the Darkon world versus the real world. And some of it is what you'd expect. It's, I can't get a girlfriend. So
Sure.
now I'm a mage.
Poor cardboard.
Oh, poor cardboard.
God.
And that's, that's typically what I expect is you get these people who have kind of shitty living situations. They're not perfectly good socially.
Sure.
But in a fantasy world, they're the king of their own castle.
Sure, yeah.
Literally.
Yeah. And that's said oftentimes
Sure.
about role-playing games, about video games, about a lot of that stuff.
But the thing that gets said that I love is when that one woman's talking about how she's a textile buyer for a
Right,
fabric
right.
company.
Sure.
And she's like, well, and if I don't do my job right, then someone shows up and they don't have the right amount of fabric for their shirt. Basically, I have no impact on
Right.
the real world.
Yeah, sure.
And I don't like that.
Sure.
If I didn't show up to work one day, someone would be disappointed, but really, on a global scale, nothing would change.
Honestly,
that's why I like Darkon,
Yeah.
because I can affect the world around me.
Sure.
And I
mean,
love that.
No matter what you do for a living, unless you're one of about 20 people, then what you do in the grand scale doesn't
Right.
really. I don't want to say it doesn't matter, because it matters.
Sure.
But the world's not going to end.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It doesn't have
We're not
that
counting
epic...
on you to make me
Yeah.
that goddamn latte.
Yeah. Well, if you phone it in at your job, somebody has an inconvenience, and
Yeah.
that's usually what happens. And I mean, that's not true of people who work in medicine, and it's not true of, well, I guess even if you develop like biotech,
Yeah.
still your failure just means that something gets made a little slower. Or
Right.
we don't get a breakthrough.
Well,
I feel like there's very few people who don't go, something rather inconsequential
Sure.
will happen.
right.
Not to trivialize what they do,
Yeah.
but it's not the same as an outcome of an epic battle that determines how everybody lives
Sure.
their day-to-day life based on what faction what regime they're now under. you
Right.
know?
Well, and the obvious rationale for that, despite just it's medieval times and everything is big, is that it's a small universe.
Yeah.
It's a tiny little sect. So, I mean, just by sheer percentage, if you die, that's probably almost, nearly a whole number percentage of
Sure.
the population of
Sure.
Darkon.
Yeah, right.
Um,
So I think that's the best way to look at it is I'm successful at my job. I do a thing that's kind of important, but my long-term decisions are not life or death. And so I want to up the stakes, so I play Darkon.
Yeah.
There's another idea that's brought up. and I'm curious what you think about it.
Mm-hmm.
There's a thought posed early in the movie through the voiceover. I think Barron says it, and it's an idea that Frank Miller toyed with in Sin City, which is just that you were born in the wrong time. That you have these skills that, you are very skilled at something, but you were just, you'd be better suited in another age. It's what Frank says about Marv, that, it's Dwight who says that line.
Yeah.
That he would have been right at home with the gladiators, but now he's a burnout in a bar. Is there any truth to that, or is that just a fucking excuse?
Yeah, I don't know. I think that a lot of people are in tune with different parts of society, and I think that the way that society works is there's a rise and fall of what's really important socially,
Sure.
or artistically, or creatively, or professionally.
Right. Do you really feel like you could transplant these people back centuries ago and that they'd be better off?
So the but to what I'm saying
Uh-oh.
is I don't think that any of these people would transplant back to a medieval age.
Okay.
Even a little.
Sure.
Probably 1984.
You think so?
That's when they would flourish, because
Okay.
that's when dorky, weird people were the kings. Look at the club kids.
Okay.
These people are the club kids circa 2008.
Right. Well, they were the kings, but they were the kings of a subculture.
Yeah.
So still not world leaders.
Sure, but the universe is, well, I don't think that there's ever a transplant to be a world leader. I think that whoever is leading the fucking people leading, they're fucking beige as shit.
Yeah,
Like,
right.
The
Lowest
only
common
way,
denominator
the
always
only way to
wins.
lead the leader of any fucking nation has only gotten there by being boring.
Be in love with war and vanilla on everything else.
You can't fucking, if it meant being transplanted, if it meant that someone from the 70s would make a better president in 2030, that
Right.
would be a completely different planet we live
Yeah.
on. But the reality of the situation is the way to rule the world is be boring, beige, and agreeable.
See, I agree with you about that. I think it's a very romantic idea that, if I was only born in another time, but I don't think that really works. I mean, for the people who have these kind of, we'll talk about the skills, Darkon, actually. Fuck it, why don't we talk about that a little bit now? There are skills that Darkon takes.
Yeah.
There's analytical skills.
Yeah.
They're the same skills you use in role-playing.
Sure.
Resource management, the same kind of skills when they're figuring out, their armor or their attack strategy. And those skills are translatable to things in the real world, but no more or less than in ye olde medieval times.
Right.
No more, maybe less. The thing that makes today a better age for these people is there's a community like Darkon. There's the internet.
Sure.
We have a better ability now, today, and in the future to do these things with each other, to find each other this way than we ever have before. But I think when he says, if I was only born centuries ago, I mean, it's part of the fantasy.
Oh, yeah. Well,
Born centuries ago, you would
die.
Yeah,
when you were
right.
25.
Sure.
There'd still be no elves, and you would probably be a slave.
Yeah, I get this idea that it's still the football players who would be, the jocks would be the gladiators, I mean, what do we know? There's no fucking way to say, but the skill, I think the best way you can make a guess is by taking what skills do people who play Darkon excel at, and then going, what would those people be doing,
Sure.
back then?
In the 80s, they'd be inventing computers.
Yeah, right.
They'd be making small businesses
Sure.
for, companies, because now the market's so saturated in small business.
Yeah.
From the people who had the ingenuity to put their analytical skills to figure out a
Sure.
good business plan to use in 1986.
Sure. So yeah, I think that's kind of an excuse. I would agree with you on that.
Well, yeah, and I mean that's kind of something they touch on when they're talking about, again, I think it's Cardboard.
Mhm.
Or it's either Cardboard or Baron.
Yeah.
Is talking about the real world mentality and how on Earth, say, I guess that's what
Sure.
we call it, right? On Earth
IRL,
versus on
in real
Darkon.
life.
Yeah. It's all this competition and all this vying to be the best and all
Sure.
this. You're identified by how many people you are better than.
Sure.
Say, take somebody like Justin Timberlake, better than everybody at everything.
Wow, that's a bull. Where the
So-
fuck did that come from?
There's that level of superstardom, and he gets all this prestige because you know that he is a particularly good social specimen. That's kind of this thing that the type of person who plays Darkon can achieve.
Right.
Because their skills don't resonate on a public scale.
Sure.
Somebody who's a great dad, somebody who can cook a mean dinner in 15 minutes.
Right.
You know, somebody who will sacrifice a part of their life and be a stay-at-home father, somebody who will be okay losing his family business.
Sure.
And still be able to function on a real level.
Sure.
He's not going to be a celebrity.
Right.
Nobody really cares if you're a great father, but goddamn if you're a funny singer-dancer.
Sure.
And that's kind of what they talk about in Darkon, is it's supposed to not be about being better than anybody and everybody's equal. And it's, you know, it's back to that idea of equality that every fucking human and every fucking nation pretends they strive toward, is this, you know, everybody's equal. And if we can just maintain that level of equality for all people, then there'd be no 99%, and communism would really work.
Yeah.
And
communism is not a good idea on paper. It's a fucking stupid idea on paper. I hate that. Oh, it's like communism, good idea on paper. No, fuck that.
Yeah.
Stupid idea on paper.
You know what's a good idea on paper? Something that works in practice.
Right. Thank you. You mean a plan you draw out that you can then execute? Yeah, that's a good fucking idea on paper. Yeah. Fuck you. Anyway, sorry.
But that's kind of what ends up happening, and that's a little bit of the conflict in Darkon, is that it's come down to the real world seeping into Darkon.
Right.
And
it is Cardboard who says that, because he's upset that everybody's picking on him in Darkon, and everybody kills his character, and he wanders out like, well, it's one of the few times you see Darkon anything less than just straight up champion.
Yeah.
You know, there's these moments that bleed through when you get a real sense of how this is impacting people.
Sure.
For the most part, this is a great defense of Darkon.
Yeah.
And so it's natural for us to kind of tear down these people, but I think we embrace them and their culture and their decision to just throw themselves headfirst into gaming. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And that's great. Immerse yourself in fantasy, totally cool. But there are these moments that are the most fascinating ones to me, where he kind of goes, you know, Darkon, for everything we've set it up to be, doesn't always work. It's supposed to be this place that I go to where I am king and champion, but it is also a social structure, and I am still at the bottom of the ladder sometimes.
And then there's the other things where Darkon creeps out of the real world, and you see Baron and his friend go to Denny's.
Yeah, right.
And spend the entire night arguing about something that happened in game, but their friendship is on the line.
Sure.
And
have you ever done or been around any kind of like role playing like that?
I played D&D once.
Sure, yeah. Our old producer used to play D&D and stuff too. Sometimes that happens. I've never really been into, you know, live action role play or whatever, but I've known a lot of people who've done it. And you have these kind of, you always question, you know, it comes up in the movie. Is this in character or out of character? What are we doing right now?
Well, I think you can tell it's out of character because Baron wouldn't go to Denny's.
Well, yeah, you would think so. But they start having this argument, and their mind works with fantasy so well that they can have an epic, you know, war treaty debate in a Denny's and not realize their surroundings. You know, when you play D&D, you fucking played it in your mom's basement. Or you play it in your, you know, your dorm room. Or you play it in your apartment.
Where you play it is wherever you can be as far removed from the real world
from
as
people
possible.
who might find out you're playing D&D
but
and
not
make fun
necessarily in the middle of the fucking forest. You're not shooting to be in the most medieval setting.
Sure.
You're looking to be in the most accepted setting where you're surrounded by where the world can't get you.
Sure. I think the fact that they can have that argument in character and out of character and the line is blurred is, you know, that's a great example of how the things from Darkon translate into the real world.
Sure.
Not just in specific one instance, you know, the fights people have or the disagreements or whatever, or where characters are talking about, you know, I have a romantic interest in Darkon, my girlfriend or whatever sometimes gets upset, doesn't realize it's just a game. You know, those kind of carryovers. But also things like the skill set. The very things that make Cardboard unlikable in the game that also make him unlikable out of game, or the things that make someone a success in the game. That's the place I really love Darkon, is where you can see characters who are successful in Darkon are the ones who have embraced, oh, there is I didn't need to go back to medieval times. I can use these skills right now in my life and be successful. Things like public speaking.
Yeah.
I mean, we just, we talked already about how some people are great at acting in Darkon and some people are bad. And it's mostly improvised. And they have these, they have these monologues all the time. And you could see who's good at public speaking from their monologues. The people who are good at giving monologues in Darkon can probably present a business proposal really well. They're good at thinking on their feet. The leaders in Darkon are probably great at team management, in real life. They could probably get the right people together to do the right job and convince someone of a certain proposal in whatever kind of job they're doing. But there's also, there's historical lessons you would learn from Darkon. There's, it's the same thing as when you play any kind of real-time strategy game, or you play Civilization, or, these kind of things where it's nations making treaties, forming bonds based on kind of mutual interests. You learn all of this through the exercise, war strategy and politics, and the person with the most land wins and allegiances. When Baron has to kind of split off from that group and take his faction somewhere else, you've seen that all the fucking time historically in real life, and it teaches you what's going on in those people's heads at that moment. One, it attracts you to history a little bit more. It's a great thing for history teachers to take advantage of, because two, it puts you in their place. You can kind of go, oh, now I see why, this person invaded this country. You don't necessarily agree with them, but you could answer a question like, why are these countries at war? Oh, because one wants more land. That seems stupid.
What were these people thinking?
If you're playing Darkon, you could go, oh, yeah, that's stupid. But there was this one time I was trying to get these 3 hexes of land. So, I kind of see where they're coming from.
Right.
I at least know that spot.
Sometimes the land means, more than just the actual fucking property. It means it means spheres of influence, and it means making a claim in the world, and
winning for your people. Coming out as a leader that has succeeded. And those are the moments that Darkon can teach you about, and some of the skills that it can kind of help you grow. We haven't talked a lot about Keldar, the other leader.
The evil bad guy, who's totally not evil and
part of the
cool
Empire,
guy.
but knows that it's a game and that he's playing the Empire guy, and he's okay. And he seems like a nice enough guy in the interviews.
Yeah, I really liked him.
Yeah, he doesn't have that Billy Mitchell kind of underhanded, sneaky. In being theatrical, the movie has to kind of paint him as the bad guy, but I feel like he's a fine guy. And he's someone who he talks a lot about. One, the movie shows that he's the most fucking successful guy in Darkon. But, he talks a lot about how Darkon helped him develop these skills. He's very cognitive of that. That's not lost on him at all. He says in real life that he has gotten to the places he has gotten to. He's earned the confidence he has and developed these skills through playing Darkon. And those things are, it's a great relationship. The better he gets at his real life skills, the more he can carry over to Darkon, the better he can play that game. And the more things he can do things like learn how to lead a team of people years before he would ever have to do that at a job. Maybe not quite the thing you'd put on a resume, but depending where you're working, maybe totally the thing you'd put on a resume. Baron, on the other hand, is the antithesis of that. He seems to blame the real world for all of his shortcomings. And as the movie ends, there's a vast number of people who, just as I've bought into the hypothesis of Darkon can make you better, there's a lot of people who seem to have failed in their lives. Yeah. We get the Baron depressed grocery shopping, or the woman talking about how she thought she'd be married and how she thought she finally has her place. She's standing in her place, not going, I achieved this, but going, I thought I'd have kids by now. I thought I'd be married by now. Pointing out all of her shortcomings. When we talked on our show about Glengarry Glen Ross, we talked about not hating what you do. Right. And these people have Darkon kind of as a retreat. Some of them use it to better themselves. Some of them have it purely as an alternative to their own shitty lives, to their Starbucks or Hot Topic manager existence. Right. Do you think that's to be praised? I mean, is it an okay idea to check out of reality and embrace fantasy to the extent that your real life you've just given up and it's terrible and it'll always be terrible, but you'll always have Darkon?
I don't know. I honestly, I can't fault anybody for choosing their own reality.
Sure.
Like, who am I to tell anybody?
It's better than just hating your reality. That's
Yeah,
for sure.
right.
That's, yeah.
And
I would agree
there
with
are
that.
people who spend fucking weeks of their life playing Second Life.
Sure.
You know, they have a Second Life wife and a Second Life house and a Second Life job
Sure.
and fucking whatever. You know, honestly, I like the notion that you can choose a new reality if
Sure.
the current one you're in seems hopeless.
Sure.
But I think that, I mean, and this is me personally,
Yeah.
I'm always going to be the type that goes, hopeless, huh? Well, let's see about that.
Yeah, right. I like that. Yeah. There's, it's better than drugs and it's better
Yeah.
than alcohol and it's better than doing nothing and it's creative and it exercises certain muscles. So I don't think it's not terrible.
No, but it's dangerous because the more people that check out of the world, the less of the world is checked into the world.
That's true. And I love when people can turn that around and can go, I'm going to use Darkon to make things better. I feel like those are the people who've really won Darkon.
Yeah.
Those are the people who win the game, is the people who go, maybe I got into this because I was interested, or maybe I got in it because my life was terrible, but I used it to kind of rehabilitate myself. And to be able to stay immersed in fantasy and then check back into reality like it's no big deal is fucking hard. And those
Yeah.
people should be commended for it.
I agree.
All right, so the website is doublefeatureshow.com. We said a lot of really heavy stuff on this show that people can totally disagree with.
Probably, and please do.
Doublefeatureshow@gmail.com. Love to talk to you all about that. Less John Carpenter isn't really something you said, but is actually that. I don't care about that.
Yeah.
But the Darkon stuff,
Yeah.
totally. Yeah, let me know how you feel about all of that. Love that we somehow also had an entire episode talking about a game.
Yeah.
Or at least half an episode, and that makes me feel pretty good. Love gaming culture. Love people
Yeah.
who play games. I have such a soft spot for the people who immerse themselves in a fantasy world, even if by definition they have to fail at reality to
Yeah.
do it. I love those people. Champion those people. What are we doing next time on the show?
We're going to do 2 Philip K. Dick features, a Philip K. Dick double feature.
Oh, this
a
is
double
sounding
dick
good.
feature
I
starring
Goddamn.
Ben Affleck in Paycheck and Nicolas Cage in Next. Watch more fucking film.
Bye.
Well, boys, looks like you started the fun without me.
You're all sick. Every last one of you.
We're going to need a bigger gun.
What's the matter? You scared of things that go boom, boom?
Give me one goddamn reason why I shouldn't blow your goddamn brains all over that goddamn wall.
Get out your white beats and your black contacts. It's time for double feature. I promise you, this is my last week of my South African musical obsession.
Yeah.
This is it. I'm only giving myself one more week for it, then I'm going to snap back to reality.
Okay.
I'm Eric, by the way.
Oh, hey.
And-
Yeah.
Hey, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Eric.
Oh, my name is Michael. I will fuck you in the ass. Punk ass white boy.
Sorry, what?
Sorry.
Oh, Jesus. Thanks for throwing me off on the intro. I don't even know what's happening right now.
2 films, double feature.
Right. But while we're spending one more week in fantasy, what are the movies we're going to do?
Wow, good one.
You're like-
So then after that, we're going to go right to the end to talk about...
Movies we're doing next time. What is The Ward? Why is that on the show? What is this thing today?
Well, The Ward is a film by John Carpenter.
Whoa, there's still John Carpenter movies we haven't done.
There's a lot.
How is this possible? I say this every time.
The Ward is actually kind of this. He did it. This is what his second comeback film.
Yeah.
It's the first film he did since Ghosts of Mars.
Finally, a glimpse of this new John Carpenter we keep referencing,
Right.
but not actually discussing on the show.
Yeah, and we've missed out on a lot of John Carpenter. We've kind of artfully dodged the 90s
Sure.
of John Carpenter, with the exception of Escape from L.A.
For now.
But there's a large portion of John Carpenter's career where he spiraled into obscurity and everybody started hating everything he did.
Sure.
He did that vampires movie with James Woods.
Oh yeah,
And he did In the Mouth of Madness.
sure.
He did all these movies in the 90s that everybody hated and were absolute critical failures and box office failures. And then he did The Ghost of Mars, which, unlike the previous films, everybody hated it and it was a box office failure. And so now we have The Ward. So The Ward is, it's a definitive return to horror.
Yeah.
The Ghost of Mars is John Carpenter dabbling in his sci-fi horror thing that we saw with Dark Star, because that was terrifying.
Right.
But The Ward is it's where horror lives, in a fucking mental institution with Amber Heard and Jared Harris.
I'm sorry, it's an asylum, sir. Yeah. You don't call a place like this an institution.
It's true.
One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest was in an institution. This is an asylum.
Fair enough. It's a sanitarium.
Yeah, sanitarium. It's really, man, that's what it is.
So The Ward, it's not written by John Carpenter.
Mm-hmm.
It's not scored by John Carpenter, but it is directed by John Carpenter.
Sure.
And it still looks like it came out in the late 70s.
Man, when the movie opens, I'm feeling the way John Carpenter films in the 70s.
Right.
But I'm a little surprised by how modern it looks. Yeah. It's definitely, it's a movie from today.
Yeah.
But
we're going to do The Ward,
and
then we're going to do Darkon.
So this is Make Me Think I'm Not Crazier Than Everyone Else double feature. This is just bringing Eric back into normality. Thanks, Michael. I appreciate that.
We've been spending a lot of time with crazy people this year on double feature. And that's just me and you sitting watching the films. Right. But also in the films,
right.
There have been a lot of crazy people.
Yeah, so we're going to make the crazy a little bit more normal today. Or maybe we won't. We'll find out. But in doing that, we're going to spoil both of the movies.
Gotta spoil them.
Yeah, you pretty much have to spoil the movies.
If it's double feature, it must be spoiled.
The thing I love about spoiling the movies is we don't have to do it at all. But it's our show, so fuck you. Use the chapters. We give you chapters. We put up a big middle finger, and then we say, but there's chapters.
Right.
And then no one uses the chapters. They just spoil themselves. Why do you do this? Skip the movie that you haven't seen. The Ward's coming up first. I'm going to spoil part of our show right now. It's going to happen first. You can skip it with a fucking chapter. You can go right to Darkon, which you'll never see anyway.
Yeah, you
it's
haven't
a documentary.
Seen it. It's really difficult to spoil Darkon.
Yeah.
We've already told you that it's a movie. That's a pretty heavy spoiler.
Yeah, right. The kind of technique and just, the camera's low to the ground. There's these incredibly still setups. The all lightning stuff, coming in. Yeah,
all stuff that John Carpenter's done. It's all John Carpenter's stuff.
But then moves directly into this smashed glass kind of intro. This it's a glimpse into the things that he was doing in Halloween. But this is, I would say, probably the most stylized Carpenter movie yet. I've seen. The
thing is, and I'm under the impression, correct me if I'm wrong, that you haven't seen The Ghosts of Mars.
That's true.
So The Ghosts of Mars is similarly stylized in that it just looks like it was made in the 70s. I don't think John Carpenter has ever made a movie that looks like it came out after 1982.
See, I don't know. I feel like this looks modern. Do
you? See,
it's
I feel
the technique that makes it look 70s to me.
Yeah, well, but that's what I mean. I don't know if it's an intentional. Yeah. I don't know if it's an intentional aesthetic to give it kind of a vintage look, or if that is really just how.
I think it's who he is, man.
Yeah, I think that's